The Galactic Confederation of Civilized Species had catalogued exactly 47,632 different ways a sentient being could die horribly on what they classified as death worlds. What they had not prepared for was discovering that the most terrifying apex predator on the most dangerous planet in the known galaxy was currently wearing a bright pink tutu and answering to the name Princess Sparkles. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Dr. Klepthorne Vizelbottom, senior xenobiologist of the Confederation's Deep Space Research Division, was having what humans might call a very bad day, though Klepthorne's species, the Grizzlethopians, measured time in units of existential dread rather than hours. The emergency transmission crackling through his tentacles had arrived precisely 17 dread units after his morning consumption of fermented algae paste. Urgent classification required, the message began, as most catastrophically important communications do. Planet designation Terra 377 shows signs of apex predator complete planetary domination. Species identified as Canis lupus familiaris has achieved total ecological supremacy. Immediate threat assessment mandatory. Klepthorne's 3 eye stalks drooped significantly. In his 412 years of cataloguing dangerous fauna across the galaxy, he had never encountered a species that had managed to dominate an entire planet so thoroughly. The razor-claw megalodons of Proxima Centauri had only managed to control 67% of their world's surface. The acid-spitting titanosaurs of Kepler 442b had reached 73% before their own hubris led to their downfall. But 100% planetary domination, that was the stuff of nightmares and theoretical xenobiology papers. "Assemble the team!" Klepthorne gurgled to his assistant, Flumpington Warbletrunk, whose species communicated primarily through interpretive dance and occasional whistling. "We need our best minds on this one." Aye. Within 48 hours, the Confederation's most elite xenobiological research vessel, the slightly nervous Inquiry, was hurtling through hyperspace toward the mysterious Deathworld. The crew consisted of Dr. Vizelbottom himself, Dr. Squeakerton Binglehopper, a renowned expert in predator psychology whose species resembled a cross between a ferret and a philosophy professor, and Commander Wibbleton Snurflebang, a battle-hardened military xenobiologist whose job was to ensure the science team didn't get eaten by whatever horror awaited them. The journey gave them time to study the preliminary reports, which grew more disturbing with each passing parsec. The Canis lupus familiaris, according to intercepted transmissions, came in dozens of different varieties. Some were described as tiny but vicious, others as enormous and powerful. Some had long flowing coats, while others were completely hairless. The diversity suggested an evolutionary arms race of terrifying proportions. "Look at this," Dr. Binglehopper chittered, his whiskers twitching with scientific excitement and mortal terror. "The data suggests they've developed specialized breeds for different environmental conditions. Desert variants, Arctic variants, aquatic variants. They've essentially created a subspecies for every possible ecological niche." Commander Snurflebang's military bearing couldn't quite hide his unease. "And the population numbers?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already dreaded the answer. "Over 600 million, Klepthorne announced, his voice cracking slightly. 600 million apex predators on a single planet. The biomass calculations alone should have caused total ecological collapse centuries ago. The slightly nervous Inquiry dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Terra system and immediately began long-range scans of the third planet. What they found defied every principle of xenobiology they had ever learned. The planet was teeming with life. Forests covered vast continents, oceans sparkled with bioluminescent activity, and the atmospheric readings showed a thriving, balanced ecosystem. By all rights, a world dominated by 600 million apex predators should have been a barren wasteland of bones and regret. There's something else, Dr. Binglehopper announced, his voice barely above a whisper. The scans are detecting another species, bipedal, approximately 2 meters tall, population around 8 billion. 8 billion! Klepthorne's eye stalks nearly tied themselves in knots. What are they? Some kind of livestock? Unknown. But here's the truly disturbing part. They appear to be living alongside the apex predators, not hiding from them, not fighting them, living with them. The implications were staggering. Had this mysterious bipedal species somehow negotiated a peace treaty with the planet's dominant predators? Were they collaborators, slaves, or worse, were they somehow controlling the apex predators for their own nefarious purposes? Commander Snurflebang made the decision that would change xenobiological history. We're going down for a closer look, but we maintain full stealth protocols. If these creatures have somehow tamed 600 million apex predators, we need to understand how before we make contact. The landing party selected a suburban area for their first observation point. According to their scans, it showed a typical density of both species, approximately 1 apex predator for every few bipedal creatures. The slightly nervous inquiry touched down in a carefully selected clearing, its cloaking systems rendering it invisible to local detection methods. Dr. Vizzlebottom, Dr. Binglehopper and Commander Snurflebang crept through the underbrush toward the edge of what appeared to be a residential area. Through their enhanced observation equipment, they could see structures that were clearly designed for the bipedal species. But troublingly, many of these same structures showed clear signs of apex predator modification. "Look at that," Klepthorne pointed with a quivering tentacle. "Those small openings in the barriers, they're obviously designed to allow the predators easy access to the bipedal creatures' dwellings. And those raised platforms in the yards," Dr. Binglehopper added, his fur standing on end. "Perfect vantage points for predator surveillance." They were so focused on analyzing the architectural evidence of interspecies cooperation that they almost missed the first live sighting. A small gate opened in one of the barriers, and a bipedal creature emerged. The aliens held their breath, expecting to see some kind of armored warrior or heavily armed survivor. Instead, they saw a middle-aged female of the species wearing what appeared to be brightly colored recreational clothing and carrying a small container of liquid. She was making soft, melodic sounds, clearly some kind of primitive communication. "Here, Biscuit. Come here, boy." The response was immediate and terrifying. From around the corner of the dwelling came bounding the most fearsome predator the xenobiologists had ever witnessed. It was enormous, easily 60 pounds of pure muscle and teeth, covered in golden fur that gleamed like burnished copper in the sunlight. Its massive head swiveled toward the bipedal creature with predatory focus, and its mouth opened to reveal a terrifying array of dental weaponry. "Dear cosmic forces," Commander Snurflebang whispered, his hands instinctively moving to his weapons. "It's going to devour her." But then something happened that defied every principle of predator-prey relationship they had ever studied. Instead of attacking, the massive predator began wagging its tail. Not only that, but it approached the bipedal creature with what could only be described as enthusiasm bordering on joy. "Good boy, Biscuit. Yes, you're such a good boy. Who's a good boy? You are. Yes, you are." The bipedal creature, apparently named something unpronounceable in their primitive language, began making high-pitched vocalizations while simultaneously petting the apex predator, petting it. Her hands moved through its fur in what was clearly a dominance display, and the predator not only tolerated it, but seemed to enjoy it. "This is impossible, Doctor," Binglehopper breathed, his scientific worldview crumbling in real time. "The predator is exhibiting submissive behavior. Look at the way it's positioning itself, belly exposed, neck extended. These are classic submission postures." But the demonstration of interspecies dominance was just beginning. The bipedal creature reached into her container and produced what appeared to be a small brown object. The apex predator's reaction was immediate and intense. Its entire body began vibrating with excitement, its massive head tracking the object with laser-like focus. "Sit! Biscuit!" The command was given in the creature's primitive language, but the meaning was unmistakable. This was a direct order from the bipedal creature to the apex predator. The response was immediate and absolute. The massive predator lowered its hindquarters to the ground, maintaining perfect eye contact with its biped master. "Oh, my cosmic consciousness!" Klepthorn's voice rose to a near shriek. "The predator is following commands. This bipedal species has somehow achieved complete behavioral control over the apex predators." The demonstration continued as the bipedal creature issued a series of commands. Stay, shake, roll over, each one followed instantly by the apex predator. The implications were staggering. Not only had this species survived on a planet dominated by 600 million apex predators, they had somehow turned those predators into perfectly obedient servants. "We need to observe more instances," Commander Snurflebang decided, his military mind already calculating the strategic implications. If this species has developed technology or techniques to control apex predators, the Confederation needs to know about it. They spent the next several hours moving through the residential area, documenting case after case of the same impossible phenomenon. Bipedal creatures of all sizes and ages were observed, exercising complete dominance over apex predators of various breeds and sizes. Small bipedal juveniles were seen commanding apex predators that outweighed them by a factor of 3 to 1. Elderly bipedal creatures with obvious physical limitations were maintaining perfect control over apex predators in their prime. But the most disturbing observation came when they witnessed what appeared to be a pack hunt in progress. A bipedal creature had attached some kind of restraining device to an apex predator and was leading it along designated pathways. The predator was clearly straining against the restraint, its powerful muscles bunching and releasing as it sought to pursue its hunting instincts. "Look at the predator's behavior," Dr. Binglehopper noted, his voice tight with fascination and fear. "It's constantly scanning the environment, marking territory, displaying classic hunting postures. But it's completely under the control of the bipedal creature." The hunt took them past several other groups of bipedal creatures, many of whom had their own apex predators under similar restraint. The predators showed clear signs of wanting to interact with each other, pack behavior that had been suppressed but not eliminated by their bipedal masters. "The social structure is still intact," Klepthorn observed. "The predators recognize each other as pack members, but they're prevented from acting on those instincts by their bipedal controllers." The hunting expedition concluded when the bipedal creature led the apex predator to a specific location where it was allowed to relieve itself. The predator's master immediately cleaned up the waste with a small collection device, clearly maintaining sanitary conditions in the hunting grounds. "Environmental control as well," Commander Snurflebang noted grimly. "They've managed to train 600 million apex predators." As the day progressed, the xenobiologists documented increasingly disturbing evidence of the bipedal species' complete dominance over the planet's apex predators. They observed predators being fed at specific times with processed food provided by their masters. They witnessed predators being subjected to regular hygiene maintenance, bathing, grooming, and what appeared to be medical examinations. Most disturbing of all, they observed predators being forced to wear decorative items that served no apparent survival function. Colored collars, small clothing items, and in one particularly harrowing case, a large apex predator wearing what appeared to be a miniature hat and matching booties. "The psychological domination is complete, Doctor," Binglehopper whispered, his scientific objectivity wavering. "They've reduced these apex predators to the level of living accessories." But the true horror was yet to come. As evening approached, The xenobiologists witnessed something that would haunt their dreams for the rest of their considerably long lives. Through the transparent barriers of one dwelling, they observed a bipedal creature and an apex predator engaged in what appeared to be a recreational activity. The bipedal creature was holding a small spherical object and making encouraging vocalizations. The apex predator was exhibiting signs of extreme excitement, its body vibrating with anticipation. Then the bipedal creature drew back its arm and hurled the sphere across the room. The apex predator's response was immediate and terrifying. It launched itself across the space with incredible speed and power, its massive jaws clamping down on the sphere with enough force to crush bone. But instead of consuming its prey, the predator returned to its master and dropped the sphere at its feet. "Fetch training!" Commander Snurflebang breathed, his military mind recognizing the tactical implications. They've turned the predator's hunting instincts into a game. The predators are hunting on command, but returning the prey to their masters instead of consuming it. The game continued for several minutes, with the apex predator demonstrating incredible athletic ability, speed, and coordination, all at the complete direction of its bipedal controller. The predator was clearly enjoying the activity, its tail wagging with what appeared to be genuine happiness. "This is beyond domestication," Klepthorne realized, his voice hollow with the weight of discovery. "This is complete psychological reprogramming. They've convinced the apex predators that serving their masters is more rewarding than following their natural instincts." As if to emphasize the point, the evening concluded with perhaps the most disturbing sight of all. The bipedal creature settled into a resting position on what appeared to be a raised sleeping platform, and the apex predator joined it. The massive predator, capable of taking down creatures many times its size, curled up next to its master like an oversized pillow. The bipedal creature began making soft, rhythmic vocalizations while moving its hands through the predator's fur. The apex predator's response was immediate. Its eyes began to close, its breathing slowed, and within minutes it was completely unconscious, vulnerable, and trusting. They've created a bond so strong that the predators willingly enter a helpless state in their presence, Dr. Binglehopper observed, his scientific fascination warring with his species' natural horror at the implications. Complete trust, complete submission, complete control. The xenobiologists returned to their ship that night with their worldview fundamentally shattered. Everything they thought they knew about predator-prey relationships, about survival instincts, about the natural order of the universe, had been turned upside down by a single day's observation. "We need to report this immediately," Commander Snurflebang declared, as they sealed themselves back into the safety of their ship. "The Confederation needs to know that there's a species out there with the capability to domesticate apex predators on a planetary scale." But even as they prepared their initial report, questions plagued their minds. How had this bipedal species achieved such complete dominance? What technology or technique had they developed? And most importantly, what did this mean for the rest of the galaxy? The answer to that last question would come sooner than they expected. The next morning brought a discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about the situation. Dr. Vizzlebottom was conducting detailed scans of the residential area when his instruments detected something that made his 3 eye stalks cross with confusion. "There's another apex predator in the area," he announced, "but the readings are unusual." The creature in question was approximately 1/10 the size of the specimens they had observed the previous day. It was covered in short, smooth fur, and had disproportionately large eyes and ears. According to their scans, it weighed perhaps 10 pounds at most, hardly apex predator material by any conventional measure. "Perhaps it's a juvenile," Dr. Binglehopper suggested, "or possibly a different species entirely." They were about to dismiss it as a minor anomaly when they observed the creature's behavior. The tiny predator was exhibiting the same territorial aggression they had witnessed in the larger specimens, but amplified to an almost comical degree. It was charging toward creatures 50 times its size, vocalizing with a high-pitched intensity that seemed to suggest it believed itself to be the most dangerous thing in the immediate area. "Fascinating," Klepthorne breathed. "It's exhibiting classic alpha predator behavior, but in a package that should make it prey for everything else in the ecosystem." The mystery deepened when they observed the other creatures' responses to the tiny predator. The massive apex predators they had studied the previous day were giving this miniature terror a wide berth, clearly recognizing it as a threat despite its diminutive size. "Napoleon complex," Dr. Binglehopper murmured, using a term from his species psychology texts. The smallest predators often exhibit the most aggressive behavior to compensate for their physical limitations. But the real shock came when they observed the tiny predator's relationship with its bipedal master. If the larger apex predators were completely dominated by their bipedal controllers, this miniature monster appeared to have achieved the opposite relationship. The bipedal creature was clearly deferring to the tiny predator's wishes, providing food on demand, offering constant attention, and seemingly organizing its entire schedule around the creature's needs. "This doesn't make sense," Commander Snurflebang muttered, his military mind struggling to process the tactical implications. Why would a species that can dominate 60-pound apex predators submit to a 10-pound specimen? The answer came through careful observation of the tiny predator's methods. Unlike the larger apex predators, which relied on physical intimidation and pack coordination, this miniature monster had developed psychological warfare to a fine art. Its vocalizations were precisely calculated to cause maximum stress and discomfort to its bipedal master. Its timing was perfect. It could sense exactly when its master was most vulnerable to manipulation. "It's not using physical dominance," Dr. Binglehopper realized with growing horror. "It's using emotional manipulation. The bipedal creature isn't controlling this predator. The predator is controlling IT." The implications were staggering. If the smallest apex predators had developed techniques to psychologically dominate the same species that had physically dominated the largest ones, what did that say about the overall power structure on this planet? "We need to expand our observations," Klepthorne decided. "We need to understand the full scope of the predator-biped relationship before we can accurately assess the threat level." The next several days brought a cascade of discoveries that challenged everything they thought they understood about the situation. They observed apex predators that appeared to be bred specifically for different functions, some for physical labor, others for companionship, still others for what appeared to be purely aesthetic purposes. They documented complex social hierarchies where multiple apex predators lived in the same dwelling with a single bipedal family, each predator occupying a specific role in the household structure. They witnessed predators being trained for specialized tasks. Some were taught to detect specific scents, others to perform complex physical maneuvers, and a few appeared to be trained for what could only be described as entertainment purposes. "The specialization is incredible, Doctor," Binglehopper noted as they watched a medium-sized apex predator navigate an obstacle course with perfect precision. "They've essentially created a living tool for every possible function." But the most disturbing discovery came when they observed what appeared to be a training facility for apex predators. Dozens of bipedal creatures were working with hundreds of apex predators, teaching them everything from basic obedience to complex behavioral modification. "This is a systematic program," Commander Snurflebang realized, his voice tight with the implications. "They're not just domesticating individual predators, they're running a species-wide conditioning program." The scale of the operation was breathtaking. According to their observations, every apex predator on the planet was subjected to this training from birth. The bipedal creatures had developed techniques to modify predator behavior so completely that the animal's natural instincts were essentially overwritten with programmed responses. "Look at the methodology," Klepthorne pointed out, his scientific mind both fascinated and horrified by the efficiency of the process. "They're using positive reinforcement, negative conditioning, social pressure, and what appears to be genuine affection to reshape the predator's entire behavioral matrix." The training process was so effective that the apex predators appeared to genuinely believe that serving their bipedal masters was their natural state. They showed no signs of resentment or rebellion. Quite the opposite, they seemed to derive genuine satisfaction from following commands and pleasing their controllers. "We're witnessing the most successful domestication program in galactic history, Doctor," Binglehopper whispered, his scientific objectivity finally cracking under the weight of what they were observing. "They've turned apex predators into willing servants." But the true scope of the bipedal species' achievement only became clear when they observed the predator's behavior toward other species. The apex predators showed no aggressive behavior toward the planet's other life forms unless specifically commanded to do so by their bipedal masters. Creatures that should have been natural prey were ignored completely, allowed to go about their business without interference. "They've selectively suppressed the hunting instinct," Commander Snurflebang observed, his military mind recognizing the strategic implications. "The predators will only attack what they're told to attack." The implications were terrifying. A species with the capability to domesticate apex predators on a planetary scale, combined with the ability to direct those predators' aggressive instincts with surgical precision, represented a potential threat unlike anything the Confederation had ever encountered. "We need to understand their technology," Klepthorne decided. "There has to be some kind of advanced behavioral modification equipment, maybe neural interfaces or chemical conditioning agents." But their search for advanced technology yielded nothing. The bipedal creature's methods appeared to be surprisingly primitive: simple vocal commands, basic physical gestures, and what appeared to be food-based reward systems. There were no neural implants, no chemical agents, no advanced technology of any kind. "How is this possible?" Dr. Binglehopper asked, his scientific understanding of the universe teetering on the edge of collapse. "They're achieving complete behavioral control, using nothing but primitive training techniques." The answer came from an unexpected source. While conducting their observations, they had been monitoring the bipedal creatures' communications, trying to understand their language and social structure. Most of their conversations were incomprehensible, but gradually certain patterns began to emerge. "They're talking about the predators," Commander Snurflebang realized as he listened to the translation algorithms process the bipedal creatures' vocalizations. "But they're not referring to them as predators or servants or tools." The translator struggled with the concept, but eventually produced a rough approximation of the bipedal creature's terminology. The word they used most frequently when referring to the apex predators was friends. "Ihr befriends." Klepthorne's eye stalks nearly tied themselves in knots. "They consider 600 million apex predators to be their friends." The implications were staggering. If the bipedal creatures genuinely viewed their relationship with the apex predators as friendship rather than domination, it suggested a completely different dynamic than what they had been observing. "Maybe we've been interpreting the relationship incorrectly," Dr. Binglehopper suggested hesitantly. "Maybe the predators aren't being controlled. Maybe they're choosing to cooperate." The idea was so revolutionary that it challenged the fundamental principles of xenobiology. Apex predators didn't form friendships with other species. They formed dominance hierarchies, prey relationships, and occasionally symbiotic arrangements. But friendship? That was a concept reserved for social species interacting with their own kind. "We need more data," Commander Snurflebang decided, though his voice suggested he was beginning to doubt everything he thought he knew about the universe. We need to understand the emotional component of this relationship. The next phase of their observations focused on the interaction between bipedal creatures and apex predators during times of stress or conflict. What they discovered challenged every assumption they had made about the nature of the relationship. When one of the bipedal creatures was observed in distress, apparently due to some kind of minor injury, the apex predator's response was immediate and intense. They positioned themselves protectively around their injured companion, showed signs of genuine concern, and refused to leave the creature's side until the situation was resolved. The predators are exhibiting pack loyalty behavior, Dr. Binglehopper observed, his voice filled with wonder. But they're treating the bipedal creature as a pack member, not as a master or controller. The behavior was reciprocal. When one of the apex predators showed signs of illness or injury, the bipedal creatures responded with what could only be described as genuine care and concern. They provided medical attention, comfort, and constant companionship until the predator recovered. "This is unprecedented," Klepthorne breathed, his scientific worldview undergoing a fundamental transformation. They're not dominating the predators, they're forming genuine emotional bonds with them. The discovery forced them to re-examine everything they had observed during their time on the planet. The training they had witnessed wasn't behavioral modification, it was education, with the bipedal creatures teaching the apex predators how to live safely in their shared environment. The obedience they had observed wasn't submission, it was cooperation, with the predators choosing to follow the guidance of their bipedal companions. The small openings in the barriers aren't for predator surveillance, Dr. Binglehopper realized with growing amazement. They're for predator convenience, so the predators can move freely between indoor and outdoor environments. And the raised platforms aren't surveillance points, Commander Snurflebang added, his military perspective shifting. They're comfort features, places for the predators to rest and observe their surroundings in safety. Even the most disturbing aspects of their observations took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of friendship rather than domination. The decorative items weren't symbols of subjugation. They were expressions of affection, with the bipedal creatures adorning their predator friends with items that brought them joy. "The fetch training," Klepthorne whispered, his voice filled with awe. "It's not weaponizing their hunting instincts, it's channeling their natural behaviors into a form of play that both species can enjoy." The revelation was so profound that it took several days for the full implications to sink in. The bipedal creatures hadn't conquered the apex predators. They had befriended them. 600 million apex predators had chosen to share their planet with 8 billion bipedal creatures because they enjoyed their company. "This changes everything," Commander Snurflebang declared, his military mind struggling to process the strategic implications. If this species can form genuine emotional bonds with apex predators, what does that mean for their potential relationships with other species? The question was answered when they observed the bipedal creatures' interactions with the planet's other life forms. The same pattern emerged: genuine care, respect, and what appeared to be affection for a wide variety of species. They maintained elaborate artificial environments for creatures that couldn't survive in the natural climate, provided medical care for injured wildlife, and had developed complex systems to minimize their impact on the planet's ecosystems. They're not just friends with the apex predators, Dr. Binglehopper realized, his scientific mind reeling with the implications. They're trying to be friends with everything. The discovery prompted a fundamental re-examination of the bipedal species' place in the galactic community. A species capable of forming genuine emotional bonds with apex predators, combined with their obvious intelligence and technological capabilities, represented something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. "We need to make contact," Klepthorne decided, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "The Confederation needs to know about this species, and we need to understand their potential for peaceful coexistence with other civilizations. The first contact protocols were unlike anything in the Confederation's extensive diplomatic playbook. How do you approach a species that has befriended 600 million apex predators? How do you ensure that your intentions are understood by creatures whose primary relationship model appears to be based on genuine emotional connection? We approach slowly, Commander Snurflebang decided, his military training adapting to this unprecedented situation. We demonstrate peaceful intent through our actions, not just our words. Then, the landing parties selected a public area where they could observe multiple bipedal creatures and their apex predator companions. They would reveal themselves gradually, allowing the locals to assess their threat level and respond accordingly. The moment of first contact came when Dr. Vizzlebottom stepped out from behind their concealment and into the view of a bipedal creature who was engaged in a recreational activity with a medium-sized apex predator. The bipedal creature's response was immediate and illuminating. Surprise, followed by curiosity, followed by what appeared to be genuine interest in communication. "Hello," the bipedal creature said, using what appeared to be a standard greeting in their language. "I haven't seen you around here before. Are you new to the area?" The apex predator's response was equally telling. Instead of displaying territorial aggression or protective behavior, it approached the alien visitors with what could only be described as friendly curiosity. Its tail was wagging, its body language was relaxed, and it showed clear signs of wanting to interact with the newcomers. "Remarkable," Dr. Binglehopper whispered through their translation device. "The predator is exhibiting the same friendly behavior toward us that it shows toward its bipedal companion." The conversation that followed would be recorded in the Confederation's archives as one of the most significant diplomatic exchanges in galactic history. The bipedal creature, who introduced herself as Meredith Plumplebottom, a name that would become legendary in xenobiological circles, explained the relationship between her species and the apex predators with a simplicity that belied its profound implications. "Oh, you mean the dogs?" she said when they asked about the apex predators. "They're our best friends. We've been together for thousands of years. They help us, we help them, and we both enjoy each other's company." The concept of dogs as a separate species designation was confusing to the xenobiologists, who had been thinking of them as a single apex predator type. Meredith's explanation revealed the true scope of the relationship. The bipedal creatures, who called themselves humans, had formed individual friendships with literally hundreds of different subspecies of apex predators. "Each breed has different characteristics," Meredith explained, her hand unconsciously moving to pet her companion, a creature called a Labrador, who was apparently bred specifically for friendliness and loyalty. "Some are better at guarding, others at hunting, some are just great companions. But they're all part of our families." The word family sent shockwaves through the xenobiological team. In their understanding, family relationships were limited to genetic relatives. The idea that a species could expand their family structure to include entirely different life forms was unprecedented. "You consider the apex predators to be family members?" Klepthorne asked, his translation device struggling to convey the concept accurately. "Of course," Meredith replied, as if the question itself was slightly absurd. "Rex here has been with my family for 8 years. He's seen my children grow up. He's been there for birthdays and holidays. He's comforted us when we were sad and celebrated with us when we were happy. He's not just a pet. He's a member of our family." Rex, the apex predator formerly known as Specimen Designation Alpha 7 in their research notes, wagged his tail enthusiastically at the mention of his name, clearly understanding that he was being discussed and approving of the content. "But how do you maintain order?" Commander Snurflebang asked, his military mind struggling to understand how a society could function with 600 million apex predators integrated into the social structure. How do you prevent conflicts and maintain security? Meredith's answer was so simple that it took several minutes for the implications to fully register. We train them, she said. We teach them what's expected. We provide clear boundaries and consistent reinforcement, and we make sure they understand their role in the family and community. You train 600 million apex predators. Dr. Binglehopper's voice rose to a near squeak. How is that even possible? Well, not personally, Meredith laughed, a sound that would become one of the most analyzed audio recordings in xenobiological history. But yes, every dog needs training. It's part of being a responsible pet owner. You can't just let them run wild. That wouldn't be safe for them or for anyone else. The concept of responsible pet ownership introduced an entirely new dimension to their understanding of the human apex-predator relationship. The humans didn't just befriend the creatures, they accepted responsibility for their well-being, their behavior, and their integration into society. What happens when the training fails? Commander Snurflebang asked, his military instincts focusing on the potential failure modes of the system. Then we work harder, Meredith replied matter-of-factly. We find different training methods, we consult with experts, we address any underlying health or behavioral issues. Giving up on a dog isn't an option, they're family. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Meredith patiently explaining concepts that challenged every assumption the xenobiologists had made about interspecies relationships. The humans hadn't conquered the apex predators through superior technology or military might. They had won them over through kindness, consistency, and genuine care. The dogs get food, shelter, medical care, and affection, Meredith explained. In return, they provide companionship, protection, and loyalty. It's not about domination. It's about mutual benefit and genuine friendship. But the most significant revelation came when they asked about the humans' relationship with other species. Meredith's face lit up with enthusiasm as she described their relationships with creatures they called cats, birds, fish, and dozens of other species that the humans had apparently befriended over the millennia. We love animals, she said simply. They make our lives better, and we try to make their lives better too. It's not complicated. It's just about caring for each other. The return journey to Confederation space was filled with heated debates about the implications of their discoveries. The humans represented something entirely new in the galactic community, a species that had achieved planetary dominance not through conquest or subjugation, but through friendship and cooperation. The strategic implications are staggering, Commander Snurflebang argued during one of their lengthy discussions. If they can form genuine emotional bonds with apex predators, they could potentially form similar bonds with any species they encounter. But that assumes they want to expand beyond their home planet, Dr. Binglehopper countered. Their entire social structure appears to be built around caring for their immediate environment and the creatures within it. They might have no interest in galactic expansion at all. Klepthorne's analysis was more nuanced. The question isn't whether they want to expand, it's whether they represent a threat or an opportunity for the existing galactic order. A species that can domesticate apex predators through friendship rather than force could revolutionize interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. The implications were indeed revolutionary. The Confederation's entire diplomatic framework was based on the assumption that different species would inevitably compete for resources and territory. The humans had demonstrated an entirely different approach, one based on cooperation, mutual benefit, and genuine emotional connection. We need to recommend immediate diplomatic contact, Commander Snurflebang concluded as they approached Confederation space. But we also need to warn them about the humans' capabilities. Friendship might be their preferred method, but they've demonstrated the ability to maintain order among 600 million apex predators. That suggests organizational and leadership capabilities that could be formidable if turned to military purposes. The report they submitted to the Confederation would become one of the most influential documents in galactic diplomatic history, but the immediate response was predictably chaotic. The idea that apex predators could be befriended rather than conquered was so alien to most species' worldview that many officials simply refused to believe it. Impossible, declared Supreme Admiral Gorpleton Thundersnacks of the militant hierarchy. No species achieves planetary dominance through friendship. They must be using some form of advanced mind control technology that our instruments couldn't detect. The evidence is overwhelming, Klepthorne argued during his presentation to the full Confederation Council. We observed thousands of interactions over multiple days. The relationship is genuine, voluntary, and mutually beneficial. The humans have achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. But perhaps the most significant opposition came from an unexpected source: the Galactic Society for the Prevention of Apex Predator Abuse, led by the renowned xenozoologist Dr. Blimperton Fizzlequack. This is clearly a case of mass species exploitation, Dr. Fizzlequack declared, his moral outrage evident in every syllable. No apex predator would voluntarily submit to domestication unless subjected to generations of psychological manipulation and behavioral conditioning. The accusation sparked heated debates throughout the Confederation. Was the human-dog relationship a beautiful example of interspecies cooperation, or was it the most sophisticated form of species exploitation in galactic history? The predators show no signs of distress or unwillingness, Dr. Binglehopper argued in defense of the humans. They appear to genuinely enjoy their relationships with their human companions. Stockholm Syndrome on a planetary scale, Dr. Fizzlequack countered. The predators have been so thoroughly conditioned that they no longer remember their natural state. It's the most insidious form of abuse imaginable. The debate might have continued indefinitely if not for an unexpected development. A second research mission to Earth, this one focused specifically on documenting any signs of apex predator abuse or exploitation, returned with findings that further complicated the situation. The second team, led by Dr. Wibblethorpe Snicklefrans, had observed human-dog relationships with a specific focus on identifying signs of coercion, stress, or unnatural behavior. What they found defied Dr. Fizzlequack's theories completely. The predators exhibit clear signs of contentment and happiness, Dr. Snicklefrans reported to a packed council chamber. They show no physiological indicators of stress, no behavioral signs of suppression, and no evidence of psychological conditioning beyond normal social learning. Indeed, but the most compelling evidence came from observations of dogs who had become separated from their human families. Instead of reverting to wild behavior or expressing relief at their freedom, the separated dogs showed clear signs of distress and actively sought to reunite with their human companions. We observed a dog named Buddy who had escaped from his family's dwelling, Dr. Snicklefrans continued. Rather than fleeing to the wilderness or attacking local creatures, he spent 3 days searching for his human family. When they were reunited, both species showed obvious signs of joy and relief. The report sparked a fundamental shift in the Confederation's understanding of the human-dog relationship. If the dogs were genuinely choosing to maintain their bonds with humans, even when given opportunities to leave, then the relationship couldn't be characterized as exploitation or abuse. This suggests that the humans have achieved something that goes beyond domestication, Dr. Snicklefrans concluded. They've created genuine interspecies emotional bonds that benefit both parties. But the most significant revelation was yet to come. A third research mission, this one focused on understanding the historical development of the human-dog relationship, uncovered evidence that would revolutionize xenobiological understanding of species interaction. Dr. Glepthorne himself led this mission, determined to understand how such an unprecedented relationship had developed over time. What he found in the humans' historical records was a story of gradual cooperation that had begun thousands of years earlier. The relationship didn't start with humans dominating wild apex predators, Glepthorne reported to the council. It began with mutual benefit. Early humans provided food scraps to wild dogs, and the dogs provided protection and hunting assistance. Over generations, both species evolved to become more compatible with each other. The concept of coevolution was familiar to xenobiologists, but usually it involved minor adaptations for symbiotic relationships. What the humans and dogs had achieved was far more profound. They had literally evolved to become better friends with each other. The humans developed enhanced abilities to read canine emotional states and body language, Glepthorne explained. Meanwhile, the dogs developed enhanced abilities to understand human vocal commands and facial expressions. Both species became more social, more cooperative, and more emotionally expressive. The implications were staggering. The humans and dogs hadn't just formed a friendship, they had evolved together to become better at being friends. Over thousands of generations, both species had changed in ways that made their relationship stronger and more beneficial. "This is unprecedented, Dr. Binglehopper declared during the council session. "We're looking at a case of deliberate cooperative evolution. Both species chose to change themselves to become more compatible with their partners." But the story didn't end with dogs. The humans' historical records revealed that they had formed similar relationships with dozens of other species over the millennia. Cats, horses, cattle, chickens, and countless others had entered into cooperative relationships with humans, each one resulting in mutual benefits and, in many cases, co-evolutionary changes. They've essentially built their entire civilization around interspecies cooperation, Glepthorne concluded. Their agriculture, their transportation, their domestic life, even their emotional well-being, all of it is integrated with other species. And the revelation forced the Confederation to completely reassess their understanding of human capabilities and intentions. A species that had built their entire civilization around cooperation with other life forms represented something entirely new in galactic politics. "The question now," Supreme Admiral Thundersnacks declared during an emergency council session, "is whether we can trust them. A species with the ability to form such deep relationships with other life forms could be incredibly valuable allies or incredibly dangerous enemies." The answer came in an unexpected form. While the Confederation debated the implications of human civilization, the humans themselves had become aware of the alien presence on their planet. Rather than responding with fear or aggression, they had done something characteristically human. They had tried to make friends. Dr. Meredith Plumplebottom, the human who had first made contact with the research team, had somehow managed to track down the location of their concealed ship. She arrived not with weapons or demands, but with a basket of homemade food and her dog Rex. "I thought you might be hungry," she explained to the startled research team. "Traveling between stars must be exhausting work." The gesture was so unexpected, so genuinely friendly, that it caught the xenobiologists completely off guard. Here was a representative of a species they had been studying and debating, approaching them not as a threat or a curiosity, but as potential friends. "How did you find us?" Glepthorne asked, his scientific mind fascinated by the humans' detection capabilities. "Rex led me here," Meredith replied, scratching her canine companion behind the ears. "Dogs have incredible noses. He could smell your ship from miles away. Plus, you're not exactly inconspicuous when you're lurking in the woods with all that equipment." The implication was clear. The humans had known about the alien presence all along, but had chosen to observe rather than interfere. They had allowed the research team to conduct their studies without harassment or demands for explanation. "You knew we were watching you," Dr. Binglehopper asked, his understanding of the power dynamic suddenly shifting. Of course, Meredith laughed. You're not the first visitors we've had, though you're certainly the most polite. Most species that find us tend to be a bit more aggressive in their approach. The casual mention of other visitors sent shockwaves through the research team. The humans had been in contact with other galactic civilizations. How long had this been going on, and why hadn't the Confederation been informed? Other species have contacted you? Commander Snurflebang asked, his military training immediately focusing on the strategic implications. Oh yes, Meredith replied cheerfully. We've had quite a few visitors over the years. The Zibblethorpe Commerce Guild wanted to establish mining operations here. We politely declined. The magnificent empire of grandiose conquest tried to invade about 50 years ago. That didn't go very well for them. The Philosophical Brotherhood of Cosmic Understanding wanted to study our dogs. We let them observe from a distance, just like we did with you. Each revelation was more stunning than the last. The humans had been quietly managing first contact situations with multiple galactic civilizations for decades, possibly centuries, and they had done it all without the Confederation's knowledge or involvement. What happened to the magnificent empire of grandiose conquest? Klepthorne asked, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to know the answer. Well, Meredith said thoughtfully, they arrived with a fleet of warships and demands for immediate surrender. We tried to explain that we weren't interested in being conquered, but they seemed quite insistent, so we introduced them to our dogs. The phrase, "introduce them to our dogs," would become one of the most analyzed statements in military history. The humans had somehow used their apex predator companions to repel an invasion fleet. How was that even possible? The invaders were expecting to fight humans, Meredith explained, with a slight smile. They weren't prepared for 600 million highly trained, fiercely loyal, incredibly intelligent apex predators who were protecting their families. The mental image of space marines being overwhelmed by friendly dogs was so absurd that it took several moments for the implications to sink in. The humans hadn't defeated the invasion through superior technology or military strategy. They had simply introduced the invaders to the reality of trying to threaten a species that was genuinely loved by 600 million apex predators. The invaders realized pretty quickly that conquering Earth would require them to fight every dog on the planet, Meredith continued. And since our dogs are family members, that meant they'd be fighting every human too. The logistics alone made it impossible. But surely a spacefaring civilization would have weapons capable of dealing with primitive quadrupeds. Commander Snurflebang protested, his military mind struggling to understand how dogs could defeat starships. You're thinking about it wrong, Meredith replied gently. They didn't need to defeat the ships. They just needed to protect their families. And when 600 million dogs decide to protect their humans, well, let's just say that ground operations become very complicated very quickly. The explanation revealed a fundamental aspect of human civilization that the Confederation had missed. The humans didn't think in terms of military conquest or territorial defense. They thought in terms of family protection, and their family included 600 million apex predators who were individually capable of taking down armored soldiers and collectively capable of making any ground-based military operation impossible. What about the Commerce Guild? Dr. Binglehopper asked, his curiosity overcoming his scientific objectivity. Oh, they were much more reasonable, Meredith replied. They wanted to strip mine our oceans for rare minerals. We explained that our dogs enjoy swimming and that strip mining would interfere with their recreational activities. When they saw how much our dogs love the beach, they decided to look for minerals elsewhere. The casual way Meredith described derailing a major commercial operation because it would interfere with dogs swimming was perhaps the most human thing the aliens had yet witnessed. The humans had prioritized their pets' recreational activities over potential economic benefits from galactic trade. And the Philosophical Brotherhood? Klepthorne asked. completing the trifecta of failed first contacts. "They're still around, actually," Meredith said. "They set up a research station on the moon and observe our dogs from there. Very respectful, never interfere, always ask permission before conducting new studies. We like them." Indeed, the revelation that there was currently an active alien research station on Earth's moon, studying human-dog relationships with human permission, was perhaps the most significant intelligence failure in Confederation history. An entire xenobiological research program had been operating for decades without their knowledge. "We should probably mention," Meredith added casually, "that we've been monitoring your communications since you arrived. We know about the big debate going on in your Confederation, is it? About whether we're abusing our dogs or whether we're a threat to galactic security." The admission that the humans had been monitoring Confederation communications sent chills through the research team. If they had that capability, what else did they know? What other surprises were they prepared to spring? "We're not upset about it," Meredith continued reassuringly. "It's natural to be concerned about new species. We went through the same debates ourselves when we first encountered extraterrestrial life, but we thought you might like to hear our perspective directly rather than just observing from a distance." The offer was unprecedented. A species under study was volunteering to participate in their own analysis, to provide direct testimony about their civilization and their relationships with other life forms. "What is your perspective?" Klepthorne asked, recognizing that they were about to receive information that could reshape galactic understanding of interspecies relations. "That relationships work best when they're based on mutual respect, genuine care, and honest communication," Meredith replied simply. "We love our dogs love us, and we've built a civilization that makes both species happier and healthier than we would be alone." Nandi. The statement was so straightforward, so honest, and so completely at odds with the complex political and military analyses being conducted throughout the Confederation that it took several moments for its implications to fully register. "You're saying that your entire interspecies relationship model is based on love?" Dr. Binglehopper asked, his scientific mind struggling to quantify such an emotional concept. "Love, respect, responsibility, and fun," Meredith confirmed. "We take care of our dogs because we love them. They take care of us because they love us. We work together because it makes life better for everyone involved. It's not complicated, but the simplicity was deceptive. As the research team would learn over the following days, the human approach to interspecies relations was far more sophisticated than Meredith's explanation suggested. It was based on thousands of years of learning, adaptation, and refinement. "Would you be willing to share your methods with other species?" Klepthorne asked, recognizing the potential value of human expertise in interspecies relations. "Of course," Meredith replied enthusiastically. "We love sharing what we've learned. Though I should warn you, our approach requires a lot of patience, consistency, and genuine emotional investment. It's not something you can fake or shortcut." The warning was prophetic. Over the following months, as news of human capabilities spread throughout the Confederation, dozens of species attempted to replicate human-style interspecies relationships with varying degrees of success. The militant hierarchy tried to befriend the war beasts of Proxima 7, resulting in a series of diplomatic incidents when their definition of friendship proved to be incompatible with the beasts' expectations of respect and autonomy. The Commerce Guild attempted to establish partnership relationships with the crystal entities of Tau Ceti, only to discover that their purely transactional approach to friendship was insulting to creatures who valued emotional authenticity above profit margins. Even the successful attempts revealed the complexity of the human achievement. The Philosophical Brotherhood, working with human advisors, managed to establish genuine friendships with several non-sentient species, but the process required decades of patient work and fundamental changes in their approach to other life forms. "The humans make it look easy," Dr. Fizzlequack admitted during a council session months after the initial discovery. But what they've achieved requires a level of emotional intelligence and interspecies empathy that most of us simply don't possess. The admission marked a fundamental shift in galactic understanding of human capabilities. They weren't just a species that had befriended apex predators. They were a species that had developed unprecedented expertise in interspecies emotional intelligence. The question now, Supreme Admiral Thundersnacks declared, is whether we can learn from them without compromising our own species' integrity. The answer came in the form of a formal diplomatic invitation from Earth. The humans, having observed the Confederation's struggles with interspecies relations, offered to host a galactic symposium on cooperative coexistence. "We'd like to share what we've learned," the invitation read, "and learn from your experiences as well. Maybe together we can figure out better ways for different species to get along." The symposium, held in what humans called Central Park in their city of New York, would become legendary in diplomatic history. Representatives from 47 different species gathered to observe human-dog relationships firsthand and discuss the possibility of applying similar principles to interspecies diplomacy. The most memorable moment came when Ambassador Grumpleton Sourpuss of the Perpetually Offended Coalition, a species known for their inability to get along with anyone, including themselves, was introduced to a therapy dog named Sunshine. Sunshine, a golden retriever with specialized training in emotional support, approached the notoriously difficult ambassador with the kind of open friendliness that had characterized human-dog relationships for millennia. Within minutes, Ambassador Sourpuss was sitting on the ground, allowing a dog to lick his face while making soft cooing sounds that his translator struggled to interpret. "This is pleasant," the ambassador admitted, his voice filled with wonder. "I had not expected such genuine warmth from a creature I had never met before." "That's just how dogs are," explained the dog's human companion, a therapist named Dr. Jennifer Wobblebottom. "They don't hold grudges, they don't judge based on appearance or species, and they're always ready to make new friends. It's one of the things we love most about them." The demonstration sparked intense discussions among the diplomatic delegates. If a species as notoriously difficult as the Perpetually Offended Coalition could form positive relationships with human companion animals, what did that suggest about the potential for improved interspecies diplomacy throughout the galaxy? The humans have developed something that goes beyond traditional diplomatic protocols, observed Dr. Klepthorne, who had become the Confederation's leading expert on human civilization. They've created a model for emotional diplomacy that could revolutionize galactic relations. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected source. The magnificent empire of grandiose conquest, still smarting from their failed invasion of Earth 50 years earlier, sent a delegation to the symposium with a formal apology. "We misunderstood the nature of your civilization," declared General Pompington Blustermax, the Empire's supreme military commander. "We approached you as conquerors because we could not conceive of a species that had achieved planetary dominance through friendship rather than force. We have come to request instruction in your methods." The request marked a turning point in galactic politics. For the first time in recorded history, a militaristic civilization was voluntarily asking to learn non-violent approaches to interspecies relations. "We'd be happy to help," Meredith replied, Rex sitting calmly at her side as she addressed one of the galaxy's most feared military leaders. "But you should understand that learning to build genuine relationships takes time, patience, and a willingness to put others' needs before your own immediate interests." "We are prepared to learn," General Blustermax replied solemnly. "Our current approach has brought us conquest but not happiness, territory but not friendship. Perhaps it is time to try something different." The weeks that followed would be remembered as the beginning of a new era in galactic diplomacy. Species that had been enemies for centuries began experimenting with human-style emotional diplomacy. Trade disputes were resolved through patience and understanding rather than economic warfare. Territorial conflicts were addressed through cooperative problem-solving rather than military action. Not every attempt was successful. Some species found human-style emotional engagement incompatible with their psychological makeup. Others tried to use the techniques manipulatively, only to discover that genuine relationship building cannot be faked. But for those species that embraced the human approach to interspecies relations, the results were remarkable. The Philosophical Brotherhood reported a 93% improvement in their research partnerships with other species. The Commerce Guild found that friendship-based trade relationships were more profitable and more stable than their previous purely transactional approach. Even the militant hierarchy, after extensive training with human advisors and their canine companions, developed new military doctrines based on protection and cooperation rather than conquest and domination. The humans have given us something more valuable than technology or territory, Admiral Thundersnacks declared during a Confederation Council session 6 months after first contact. They've given us a new way of thinking about our relationships with other forms of life, but perhaps the most profound change was philosophical rather than practical. The discovery of human civilization forced the galaxy to reconsider fundamental assumptions about the nature of intelligence, power, and success. We had always assumed that advanced civilizations inevitably became more isolated, more competitive, more focused on their own species' interests, Dr. Binglehopper observed during a scientific conference on post-contact xenobiology. The humans have demonstrated that the opposite is possible, that advancement can lead to greater cooperation, deeper relationships, and more inclusive definitions of family and community. The long-term implications were still being debated, but one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same. A species that had achieved planetary dominance by befriending apex predators had inadvertently become the galaxy's leading experts on interspecies emotional intelligence. And on Earth, in a small suburban yard, a golden retriever named Biscuit continued to chase his tail, completely unaware that his friendship with a human named Meredith had sparked a revolution in galactic diplomacy that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The universe, as it turned out, was a much friendlier place than anyone had imagined. You just needed to know how to make friends with it.